Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of Non-Duality with Syed and Kyle. In our first episode, we explored the story of awakening. Today, we're diving into a deeper question. Certified enlightenment. How can you know if someone is truly enlightened? Can anyone really confirm it? Or is it always just a matter of belief and feeling? We'll look at what enlightenment actually means, how different teachers describe it, and whether it can ever be recognized in another person. Along the way, we'll talk about non-dual awareness, the role of silence versus noise, and what makes someone authentic, or simply performing spirituality. Let's get started.
Okay, welcome everyone to episode 2 of Non-Duality with Syed and Kyle. Episode 1, we talked about the story of awakening, and by now, I'm sure many people have seen many podcast episodes with many people describing their awakening story. But today, we'll be talking about a related subject, the subject of certified enlightenment. How can you even know if someone is enlightened or if anyone's enlightened, or even sometimes, even are you enlightened already? Yeah. So, welcome to episode 2, and let's start the discussion. Okay, Kyle, so how do you even know if someone is enlightened?
I think a good place to start would be to ask yourself first, am I enlightened? First of all, what does enlightenment mean? Because to ask the question, am I enlightened or is that person enlightened, implies that you know what enlightenment is, right? So what is your definition of enlightenment for you, Saeed?
Well, only what I've read in the books, right?
And what do the
Uh,
books say?
the the books talk about no self, non-duality, and Jed McKenna calls it abiding non-dual awareness. So it could be maybe a person's experiences just the moment and not thinking about the past and the future. But this is all theoretical on my end.
So the question is, does that person live in abiding non-dual awareness, and are they fully in the moment, moment to moment? That's kind of what you're asking, I guess.
Yeah, that's really all you can get from the descriptions in the book. It's all secondhand knowledge, right?
Mhm. Yeah, so and we hang out. What what made you take the leap and take a chance on Kyle when he came across me, a while back?
It's more it's more like a feeling. I don't think this guy is lying about what he's saying,
Right,
right?
right.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so when people make claims like I'm enlightened or I live in abiding non-dual awareness, those can sound like fantastical claims. So when you get the vibe that, oh, this person's saying that, but at the same time, you have the feeling, I don't think he's lying, you know, then that's kind of an interesting turn of events, you know. And I would say that, yes, there is um, something called abiding non-dual awareness, and that is my experience. And abiding, though, can sound very pious. It sounds kind of holy and or prestigious or just fluffy,
Hmm.
spiritually fluffy. What does abiding mean? Just mean, and what is a non-dual awareness? So let's tackle those, I guess. Abiding, meaning it doesn't go away. It's always with you. It's a constant experience. Non-dual awareness. What is non-dual awareness? Just seeing that although everything appears separate from each other, it ain't. There's an underlying connection between all things. And that connection is not like a thing that connects everything. It's that everything is at the deepest level made of nothing. And that nothingness is the same in all things. So that nothingness is not separate. Yeah, so abiding, non-dual awareness. How do you know? Yeah, it's a feeling. How do you know if, well, it's kind of easy, like when you hear some teachers say, well, you're already enlightened. And, you know, if you're kind of a lazy ass spiritual seeker, you might be like, yeah, I like that. I like the sound of that. But if you're honest and your definition of enlightenment is abiding non-dual awareness, then you know to agree with that statement, I'm already enlightened, is kind of silly. Because obviously most are not in that place. And um, it's not an arrogant thing to say that. It's just a fact, you know. Just look around you know, look around the world. Do you see that everybody's enlightened? You know, does it look like everybody has realized that they're not who they think they are, and are resting in that space moment to moment? You know? So, but when you look at someone else and they're saying that they're, like, use Kyle for example, use me for example, uh, and they're saying, "Hey, I'm enlightened," you know, or any other teacher out there who basically implies that they're enlightened, but will never say that they're officially enlightened. You know, how do you know for sure? He said you have to go off of a feeling. It's just a feeling that the person's not lying. So I would say also a good barometer for that is to, if you come across someone who says they're awake, just to sit quietly and, like, maybe you know, stop by a YouTube video or something, and some guy said that, or is implying that they're awake or whatever. You know, if you're curious, if you don't quite have a yes or no inside, uh, then just hit pause, close your eyes for a second. And then when you open them again, hit play. And as you're watching it again, just, you know, ask, does it feel like this person is performing?
Mm.
You know, that's like, I would say there's two criteria that are helpful if you want to kind of get a good sense of whether or not someone is awake. And the first one would be, are they performing? Does it seem like they're just pretending? And the second one would be, do they believe their performance? You know, because you can have some teachers who I would say are authentic out there, who kind of joke around, who appear to be performing a bit. But if you hold it up to the, second bit of criteria there, does it look like they really believe their performance?
Hmm.
Then usually if they're genuine, they don't tick that box. They don't actually believe. One popular guru comes to mind,
Hmm.
Osho.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, so I mean, there's Osho. He's got the long robes that his followers, first of all, oodles of followers. Um, and he's wearing the robes, the fancy robes or whatever that his followers made for him, his fancy hats and his
Hmm.
fancy chair and his 72 Rolls Royces, or what, 72, I think. And if you just judged him by that first criteria and that was it, is he performing? You'd be like, yeah, he's guilty as sin. you know but if you watch him, if you're quiet and then you watch him and you
Hmm.
feel his energy, you can tell he doesn't believe it. He doesn't buy any of it. He's, of course, passed on, but I'm talking about him in the present tense. Well, at least the form of Osho is passed on. But um, yeah, I think that's a pretty good barometer for gauging whether or not someone, because there's another, I won't name names, but I can think of another popular guru who is alive today who
Hmm.
reminds me of him, who seems to be almost trying to emulate him. I won't, let's just stay away from names, but, it looks like one day this person sat in front of a mirror and held up a picture of Osho and was just like,
Hmm.
you know, you know, trying to emulate that. And then, so if you watch this particular person, some people will probably already know who I'm talking about, but, you can see, okay, yeah, there's performance going on. Does he believe it? And I would say,
Oh.
yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Regarding that, I think because of the internet and YouTube, and there's going to be even more and more people, uh, you know, claiming enlightenment, and you're going to be on the list of, oh, just another
yeah,
guy. Hmm.
yeah. Well, I definitely am just another guy. Uh, yeah, it's anything that is starts to catch on, and
Yeah.
it becomes a trend. I used to do some interviews with some folks who had near death experiences, and I remember I I did some where you could really sense they weren't lying, and they're speaking from their direct experience. And then I remember another one I did where you know this woman was grabbing things from everywhere and trying to
Oh.
piece together, because near death experiences have become a very trendy thing. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, that gut feeling you're talking about, that will never let you down if you know how to listen to it.
Hmm. Well, you brought up Osho. Could you describe like the first time you encountered him, and did you feel like the same way? This guy's performing, that he's truly awake?
Yeah, I had just moved out of my parents' place, moved to BC, British Columbia, and so I'd already gone through that awakening probably a year before, and but I was curious. I was always interested in hearing about other teachers, see what they're doing, see what they're up to. And I remember coming back from work one day. I stopped at a mall, and they had some discounted books and audio tapes, um, and uh, and sure enough, there was a little cassette tape, Osho on Zen or something. And so that was the only thing there amongst all the books that seemed remotely interesting. So I thought, what the heck, in spite of the fact that he was a prototypical looking guru, with the beard, and I wasn't very interested in Zen anymore at that point. But yeah, I remember buying it, and then on the way home, I popped it in the cassette player, and all of a sudden I start hearing him speak. First, you hear the beautiful birds in the background when he was on his uh, at his ashram or whatever. But yeah, and then he started speaking, and it was like, you know, at first I was like, what? Because he uh, he intentionally changed how he spoke. He would slow his words down. He would have prolonged S's.
Hmm.
Everything was after he would say something. And at first I was like, well, who is this guy? And then, of course, I started to listen more, and I could tell that although there was a bit of a performance there in how he was speaking, it was still coming from a genuine place. So, yeah, that's how I got introduced to him.
Hmm. You could tell just from the audio and
Yeah, yeah. It's been said that if a person is awake when they speak, and if you're sensitive to it, you can detect the sound of silence. Silence has a sound, and people call it the sound of
hmm.
um, you know. And I could hear that in his voice. I could hear where it was coming from, and I could tell that just where his words were coming from. That it was a safe place to take in the words.
After that, did you continue reading Osho or learning from his style?
No, I lost all interest in reading by that point. Um, but I was still on YouTube, so I looked him up and
Hmm.
appreciated his talks, but I didn't really listen to a whole lot of them. I was more interested in the ones where he would tell jokes, and he had some great jokes and a wonderful sense of humor, and so that's what I watched of him. Yeah.
Regarding Osho, with all the different teachers, you do see a lot of different like personality types and different styles of communicating.
Mhm.
And is that personality like your own style of communicating? Is that Kyle or is that the enlightened person?
Well, I would say if there is an enlightened person, then that would be Kyle,
Hmm.
because there's enlightenment is something that kind of happens through is kind of, you could say, channeled through a human being. It's not The personality is not enlightened. The personality itself is just the personality. It's just old machinery, and the enlightened awareness, enlightened consciousness is easily passing through that filter. and not being stopped. And not only that, but it's also working in unison with the filter now. You could say the filter has become a servant of the enlightened consciousness. You know, yeah, I mean, the one who's talking right now is Kyle,
Mm.
the programmed guy, programmed character, the one who learned how to speak at the age of, 3 or whatever. Uh, so all that machinery is still functioning, still operating. The hypnotic veil, the knot of ego, is not there. And that's very hard to tell the difference between what's coming through as being just a stream of consciousness versus a stream of consciousness hitting a roadblock, a psychic roadblock or a psychic knot, and getting all jumbled up and then being spit out on the other side as somebody, some apparent somebody, you know.
Mm.
That all sounds terribly confusing when I hear myself saying it. So let me know if you need me to
Uh,
try to rephrase.
I do think the entire subject of non-duality and enlightenment is incredibly confusing for everyone.
Yeah, yeah. I do my damnedest to try to reduce
Mm.
that confusion, but it's a very, it's the purpose of every human journey.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
Is that a belief or?
no,
Hmm. It's more of a belief on this side, on my end. I
yeah.
hear.
And that's the healthiest angle to take,
Mm.
to acknowledge that it's really just a belief at the moment and not like something verified in your own experience. Um, yeah, because it's so common to just hear that, and maybe it sounds nice. A lot of religions are like that. It sounds nice, or even just sectors of spirituality. That sounds nice, and a lot of people are satisfied with just things that sound nice.
Mm.
So if you're not satisfied with that, that's a blessing. You know, to say, yeah, that might be true, but it's not true for me. So I'm going to find out.
Right. Um, Earlier I said all of this non-duality and enlightenment thing, it's secondhand knowledge. It's just from the books. It's not my experience.
Yeah,
That's what
and not just spirituality, uh, enlightenment stuff, but everything is pretty much secondhand knowledge,
hmm,
like everything. The only knowledge that's primary is obviously what was never taught to you. That was just factual the moment you came into the world. That's part of what I focus on when I talk about the method or whatever, is just that. What is the thing that was never told to you that can never be proved wrong? No matter how many people disagree with you. What is the one thing that is unshakable that you know for certain? And even you or anybody else, doesn't matter whether you feel you're awake or not, can answer that question if you're quiet for a moment and you sit with it. Well, what do I know for sure?
hmm.
most people will come up with nothing. If you're quiet enough, you'll say, well, I don't know anything for sure, other than that I am, but there's something is going on here. Something seems to be conscious. What do what is consciousness then? What is that? I don't know. But I do know something. That's your primary knowledge. Everything else is, yeah, it's just borrowed. You took it on because, yeah, that's helpful. Okay, step that way. Okay, now I'm walking, you know, speak that way. Okay, now they understand what I'm saying.
Does enlightenment have anything to do with acquiring knowledge, like a type of addition to your life, or?
Yeah, I love, I think I mentioned Don Miguel Ruiz.
Mhm.
It's not so popular in the non-dual scene, but he's an awake fellow and comes from that Toltec tradition in Mexico.
Right.
And he said that in their tradition, when someone awakens, they um, gain access to something they call silent knowledge.
Mhm.
And I would agree with that. Is awakening is not like, the world, the cosmic library, which I think a lot of people do kind of think of that when they think of enlightenment. They think, oh, you're just an instant Einstein or something, or you have access to all cosmic knowledge. Uh, it hasn't been my experience, but what has been my experience is uh, a silent knowledge has been revealed. And the silent knowledge is a clear seeing of consciousness in all things. And just by remaining silent moment to moment throughout the day, I'm there's a knowledge that I receive just by looking around, looking at anything. Everything is made of consciousness. That's a knowledge that comes through silence, silent knowledge. And yes, that's cosmic knowledge, I guess you could say. And there's insights and intuitions that are sprinkled throughout the day and that come and go. But you see has always been here. It's never really not been here. The only reason you don't see it maybe right now is there's some noise, the noise of me that is blinding, consciousness from seeing itself.
Mm. So throughout the day, for you, you're not like thinking, I have to go to the grocery store and then I have to do this, and there's this list of things I have to do, mow the lawn, and
I use my iPhone a lot to set
mm,
reminders and alarms. So I do forget a lot. But when I do have to think, it's usually very utilitarian, like, okay, make a grocery list, think about that.
mm.
Yeah, but most of the time there's just quiet. only because noise is suffering. It's, a lot of people wouldn't say that because they've become accustomed to the noise, become accustomed to the suffering, to the struggle associated with the noise. But it is anything that kind of acts as a splinter, something that tries to wedge itself to create this feeling of separateness, which is what noise is. Silence is unity, noise is the illusion of separation, right? When you're silent, there's nobody to say that you aren't everything that exists.
Is the noise all of the thoughts? Is, is that what you mean by noise?
Yeah. Yeah. Thinking when you really don't need to be thinking.
Hmm.
So how often does that happen?
All the time.
I feel your pain.
So would you say like episode one we were talking about like your life in high school, you were thinking all the time?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Constant strategizing. And that's really what
Mm,
the thinking is about. It's strategizing a way to arrive at a moment of peace, of rest. So you can just take a breath in this nightmare we call life. At
mm,
least from the mind's perspective. Life is kind of a nightmare, you know, for most people, whether they want to admit it or not. You're constantly having to think about how to save yourself,
mm,
to protect yourself, to achieve something, which is also protecting yourself so that you're not rejected. It's, whether most people want to admit it or not, life is constant hell.
Um, this thing about thinking, it's one of the subjects that essentially all teachers talk about, that after awakening, their thinking was significantly reduced in their life. And someone like Eckhart Tolle, he would say that it's essentially thinking that reduced by like 90% in his life.
Yeah. So why is that?
Mm,
That must mean that if we're saying that enlightenment is the death or the deflation of the ego, then it must be that thinking is ego. Because if everybody's reporting back saying, "Oh, it got a lot quieter," hmm, yeah, so whenever you're thinking, you can be sure that that's not who you are.
mm. How does thinking play a role in your life now?
Yeah, it's a gift so that we can pay the bills on time and not get put out on the curb and pay the mortgage. And so it's a gift when used as a tool. It's not a curse anymore, you know. Uh, but I wouldn't say it's like as pedestalized as it once was.
Mm,
It's just kind of a benign thing that is picked up when it's needed and dropped when it isn't.
if enlightenment is no person, can it ever be verified by a person?
It can be verified through, I would say yes, as a short answer. It can be verified through the clear seeing of what's no longer happening in a human being. So usually what precedes awakening is kind of a dark night of the soul where you're at a point of no return, and um, your inner world is usually, for a lot of people, it's varying degrees, I suppose, for everybody, but usually there's some kind of moment of internal resistance, some last battle waged against reality. And so a lot of kind of dark thought processes happening. And then once that final step over the edge is taken and you just jump, uh, you can call it surrender, total surrender, the total giving up of trying to be somebody. And that happens, it becomes very noticeable, even for the programming, the human being character, whatever the shell that's still there. It becomes very noticeable for the brain to recognize that something very profound has shifted. Something has clearly stopped happening. That suffering, constant, nightmare I was talking about is not there anymore. And the brain, it's all connected. The brain, the eyes are perceiving, like I said, that silent knowledge. It's picking up that from all things, and it's interpreting it as what we call consciousness. So yeah, it is possible but can only be verified. You'll only ever really truly verify that enlightenment is real once you are enlightened, once you are awake. Up until then, it'll just be a good guess, and you'll have a strong sense that yes, it must be a thing. It must be, but it won't be 100% until you verify it yourself.
Is it always a nightmare before awakening?
Yeah. Like I said, everybody is living in a nightmare, unless, if they don't, whether or not they want to admit it or not, it's in varying degrees. A lot of the time, the nightmare is kind of subdued, and it's just kind of a subtle struggle to the next thing, right? It's like one damn thing after another kind of nightmare. And then there's the more in your face nightmares. So I think it's all a nightmare. And then, so yeah, when you hear some people say, "Oh, I woke up, I just woke up someday," you know, and that was it. And you're like scratching your head. It's like, what? Doesn't make any sense. Maybe they didn't define their previous state as one of suffering or struggle, but that's certainly what I would describe it as. When so long as you take yourself to be somebody, that's a nightmare.
Okay, so that was Certified Enlightenment, episode number 2. Any last words, Kyle?
Have a good day. It's good seeing you again.
That brings us to the end of episode 2 of Non-Duality with Syed and Kyle. We explored the question of certified enlightenment, what it really means, how to sense authenticity in a teacher, and why silence and direct experience speak louder than borrowed ideas. If today's conversation sparked something in you, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment or a question, and we may explore it in a future episode. Thanks for listening. Stay present, stay curious, and we'll see you in episode 3.